started running in January 2020 and I ran my first marathon later that year during lockdown. However, 2 weeks ago I ran my first official marathon, but what are my thoughts on the race and how did I get on? This is my race recap of the Schneider Electric Marathon de Paris 2021. 26.2 miles in 2 hours, 39 minutes and 27 seconds, an average kilometre pace of 3 minutes 47, finishing 126 out of 38,000 runners, which is absolutely nuts. Genuinely, I've still not gotten over that. That was including professionals. Just absolutely mad. If you're a returning subscriber, you're probably sick of me going over that. However, if you're new, my name is James Ward and I've made 2 videos of the marathon and 1 after the marathon, and this I'm going to be going over the recap in a little bit more detail, going over a few more of the technicalities. So let's get into the video. Not only was this my first official marathon, it was my first time being in Paris, so the course was very interesting, I must say. First time being in Paris, and it was an absolutely great way to see the city. You get to see all the landmarks, all this typical touristy stuff that you might not even want to do. Like, I don't really actually enjoy doing too much touristy stuff. You know, you kind of want to go somewhere and get a real feel for it rather than going to old museums and stuff. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I don't really like doing the touristy stuff, so it was great to get it all out in one day or in a few hours because it's all very compact. So it starts off in the centre of Paris in the Avenue des Champs-Élysées. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I do apologise to anyone who's French who maybe I've butchered that pronunciation, but it was absolutely beautiful. It's a really nice wide road. However, the road gets a little bit thinner, and then honestly, the first 6 kilometres was quite tough. It gets really congested, but everyone was helping each other out. The crowds were coming out. The crowds weren't quite as big as I thought they were going to be, but probably through COVID and other stuff, people are probably staying inside a little bit more. I've noticed in France, it seems to be a little bit stricter than what people are like in UK. Like, everyone wears masks on the trains in France, even though you're supposed to in UK. Like, it's pretty 50-50. I honestly think people have just kind of given up with half of the stuff now, but all the COVID laws are still well in place in France, which is absolutely fine. It didn't ruin the trip by any means, but it meant that the crowds weren't quite as in full force as they would have been. It didn't take away from the atmosphere, I didn't find. The atmosphere was absolutely great, people cheering you on, and it was honestly like a carnival-like atmosphere. And the best part of this race was you have so much different feels of the run, but I'll get into that in a bit. I'll do it in chronological order, shall we? So again, it starts off on the Avenue des Champs-Élysées, and as you go through, the road gets a little bit thinner. For the first 6k, it's very congested. Now, this might have been exaggerated for me because it was my first marathon. The quickest race group I could have got in was a 3-hour running group, but realistically, I should have been in a run. Well, not should have been, I hadn't earned it yet, but for my pace, a lot of people in the running group in front of me were trying to get a similar pace to what I was wanting to get, and I was actually in quite a poor position within my start, so I was towards the back of the run and I was trying to get up through people, but I wasn't trying to exert any energy in like really shuffling to try and explode past people. So I was still trying to take my time and just stay in a stoic mindset, just try and stay nice and calm. But it was really difficult because it was so congested. People were going slower than what I wanted to run, so I did have to manoeuvre around quite a few people. After the first 6 kilometres though, it really opened up, and for me personally, my pace was 3 minutes 48 average kilometre pace for the first 5k, and then I started getting a little bit slower, strangely enough, as the race opened up. And I think the reason for that was there were big running groups that were formed, probably that were running in the group in front of me that I'd managed to catch up on in that time because they started a couple of minutes before us or so. And I'm not used to running with people. I do a lot of my runs, well, all of my runs solo. I haven't trained in a club or anything. So for me, that was very off-putting. And I found it so difficult to get used to my own pace because how I normally keep pace is I get in a rhythm of like sound with my breath and my footwork. So I breathe in from my nose every 2 strides and out through my mouth every 2 strides. So I do this, but I couldn't hear myself very well, but maybe that actually was a blessing in disguise because a lot of people will run negative splits, meaning that they get quicker each kilometre or each section of the race. The research at the minute suggests that the first half of the marathon is better to be a little bit slower than the second half if you're trying to run a PB, and that was what my marathon was. So even though I wasn't trying to do that, I was trying to run a consistent pace throughout the whole run. I couldn't help myself but the first half of the run be a little bit slower. What's so good about this race, I know I briefly touched on it, but there were so many different sections of the race, and there was never a point ever throughout the whole run where I was bored or I didn't know where to go. It was so clear. After around 10 kilometers, you started to get into like a bit more woodland and a bit more forest, and you saw these nice beautiful lakes, and it was just lovely. It really was. This was probably the quietest time of the race, and being a tourist in Paris, in France, it was just quite nice. It's a beautiful way of seeing the city. So once you get through that, then around 21 kilometers, 20 kilometers, something along those lines, when you get to the half marathon stage, you get into a little bit more of a city again, and I believe it's actually very close to where you were before in on the city, but a little bit closer to the river that goes through Paris. And then around 25 kilometers, you go through these tunnels. Now, me personally, I really didn't like the tunnels, and it was because I was feeling incredibly dizzy. So people were playing the drums in the tunnels, and even though it was absolutely good vibes, when I first went in, I was like, oh, this is cool. Then you get further down the tunnel. I think one of the tunnels went on for 2 or 3 kilometers. I was running down the tunnel, and I think it was because of these people playing the drums and instruments and the lights, everything. Because the echo, I felt my calves tingling, and I started to panic for a second because I thought maybe this is the carbohydrates just leaving my body. I'm like, oh no, maybe I don't have enough carbs in me. But I literally closed my eyes and ran. It was like the stickiest part of the race. Now, whether this is just me, it could be. Maybe this was just my own personal experience. But I found with the echoes in the tunnel and that, it was good fun, but it made me feel a little bit dizzy, honestly. But I got through the tunnel, and then I realised, oh no, I feel absolutely fine. It was just a sound that was just making my body vibrate, and when my calves were vibrating, I genuinely thought, fuck, I'm running out of carbs. But no, it was all good. I got through that point, and then whenever I heard drums or people dancing, people cheering you on from that point out, it was absolutely great, and it actually really, really helped. Overall, the course was absolutely fantastic. It was split up lovely. Around 31, I think 34 kilometers, there was a big hill, and then once you got past that, you're going through woodland again, so you got to the last couple of kilometers where you kind of finished back up at the finish line, where you're back inside the city then. But it was absolutely unreal. I highly, highly recommend this marathon to anyone. The fueling and hydration of this marathon, it was honestly felt like a well-oiled machine. Every 8 kilometers there was these Evian stands. The race was sponsored by Evian, so there's these huge rows of Evian stands with these little glasses or little plastic bottles of water rather, and they'd give you them out. Now, because it was my first marathon, I just found myself learning these tips and tricks of some of the more senior, more experienced runners. So when you have the water, you just pour half of it on the floor. I noticed people were doing that. And then on the second stand, I was looking around like, yeah, this ain't my first rodeo, mate, pouring half of it on the floor. Because you're not spilling it over yourself, I imagine. I mean, I was copying them, trying to make out I was experienced on the second one, third one, fourth one. Just letting you go, oh, I set my first marathon, mate, you know what I mean? Pour that out. I've been here before. Rookie? You're a rookie, aren't you? Well, I'm not. And then in it goes. So every 8 kilometers, it was lovely. I was taking advantage of all the water stations because I was just gelling. So every first 35 minutes, and then after that, every half an hour, I was having a gel. So I had 4 gels with me over the course of the race, with one just before the race. And honestly, my fueling was absolutely fantastic. It couldn't have gone any better. I normally had problems going with the toilet before I go out on a run. Didn't have anything. I didn't run out of carbs the whole run. It couldn't have gone any better. That was one thing that I was just really, really nailed. That was probably the best thing in review of my whole marathon was my supplementation. It couldn't have gone any better. I had energy for the whole race, and yeah, I peaked at the right time. And these water stations every 8 kilometers are really handy. Like, they have these like almost backboards. Imagine like a basketball backboard. You just throw the water against a backboard and into the skip. I don't know if that's a recurring theme amongst marathons, but it was really easy. You couldn't miss them, and it was good for the environment because there's no plastic being wasted. And as well as it got a little bit more into the race, I think around a half marathon point, maybe slightly after, there were cakes, bananas. I didn't take advantage over any of them, but at the end of the marathon, marathon, they had cakes, bananas lined up. I scrammed a cake, had 2 water bottles, a banana, and it was absolutely unreal. I was just craving something sweet. The hydration and just general like supplementation I found for my personal use was great. And in terms of the marathon, again, it just felt like a well-oiled machine. All the water stations every 8 kilometers, cakes, bananas. They were cutting the bananas up in half as well, people handing them out. It was just really helpful. A couple of videos before my marathon video, I made one where I was speaking about my $550 NyQuil. I put it in dollar even though I'm British, just because it sounds more exaggerated, doesn't it? It was said, oh, just a 400 quid or 396 pound NyQuil. I guess it's less clickbaity. I was wearing the Nike ADV Running Division vest and shorts, which were absolutely great. Dry fit technology, they were brilliant. Had absolutely no chafing whatsoever. All of my race equipment was absolutely great. My watch, my belt, I was wearing a running belt underneath which I kept my gels in. I wasn't wearing a backpack or anything like that. I was just wearing a running vest, and then under my running vest I just had a running belt clipped around my waist which I had my gels in. As simple as that. Everything was absolutely fine. And my race shoes, I was wearing the Nike Alpha Flies. These are one thing I had a little bit of an issue with, and I'm not sure if it was the shoe or it was because I didn't run in them for as long as possible. In terms of the ability of the shoe, no complaints, absolutely perfect. However, what I will say, I found with the Alpha Flies a little bit more so than the Vapor Flies. I personally find that the Vapor Flies are easier to run if you're landing on your heel first. Now, the first half of the race, I was running in quite a nice running form, but naturally throughout the 26.2 miles, your running form, or my running form, was starting to get a little bit worse. And I think it might have affected me particularly more because I was injured in the build-up to my marathon, so I couldn't fulfill some of my peak weeks, so I didn't get the amount of volume in that I would have liked. So I feel like my muscles were getting tired quicker than I maybe would have done if I would have been able to complete my peak weeks, complete some more of my long runs that I had to miss through a calf strain, through an Achilles strain. So my form is getting worse, and I was starting to land on my heels a little bit more towards the end of the race. And in the Alpha Flies, I found that a little bit uncomfortable. Now again, perhaps I wouldn't have had that issue if I wouldn't have got injured. However, I was injured, and I found that just because of that big step underneath the Alpha Flies, in between the front, underneath the ball of your foot on the AirPods, there's quite a big step before it gets to the Zoom X foam on the back. In terms of the performance of the shoe, first half of the race were absolutely outstanding, no complaints, because I was running in a nice form, I was running on the ball of my feet. But again, as I got through the race, my form started getting a little bit worse, so they started to rub a little bit, and I don't know if it was because I didn't give my shoes a lot of time to bed in before I ran. I probably only ran about 25 miles in them. It's quite common for you to run a minimum of 50 miles in your race day running shoes just so they get familiar to your feet, and I had a really bad blister at the end of the race. Now again, it's 26.2 miles, it's something slightly rubbing over the course of 2 hours 40 minutes. It's gonna hurt, isn't it? Now it was hurting me, but it was nowhere near enough pain for me to stop. But then when I looked down at my shoes, they were white shoes, and there was just blood all over the shoes, so I was a little bit concerned of getting it out. But honestly, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. That was my only complaint, but again, it was probably my fault if I'm honest, because I didn't give my shoes enough time to bed in. Apart from that, Alpha Flies absolutely great, and I'd highly recommend them also. So I've just come to my laptop. As you can see, you can't really see that, can you? I was going to say as you can see, even though I did say as you can see. No one can see, but I'm on my laptop, and that is because I'm going to be analysing my splits and my average heart rate. As you can see on screen, the first split, 3 minutes 49 kilometre. Again, the first 5 to 6 kilometres of the race I found were quite tough, mainly for pacing reasons. So it was congested, so again, I wasn't trying to over-exert. So 3:49, 3:45, 3:49 average kilometre, 3:46, 3:46 again, and then once it opened up around kilometre 6, around 3:38. Little bit worse though from this point out. So this is where I explained earlier, after the first 6 kilometres, nothing really more to talk about apart from it was congested. But then I started to get really confused, and you'll see a few real spikes up in my splits getting slower. So around 7, I became 9 seconds slower on my kilometre than kilometre 6. And then after that I went up to 3:55, which was not what I was wanting to do at all. And then 4 minutes kilometre, which is basically 20 seconds, 15 seconds slower than what I was wanting to set, which is really not good if I'm honest. I'm not beating myself up about it because it was my first marathon and I was getting distracted by the people around me because I was running in large groups, and for me to run past them, it just felt weird. When everyone's running like that and everyone's running in the same rhythm, it just feels like you just want to run in the same rhythm that they're running at. So I just found myself for like 10 seconds at a time, like running with them, and then I'd snap out of it and then go again. So again, I'm not beating myself up about it. It's all a learning curve ultimately. It would be better if I was running with someone. If I found someone early that was running for my same pace, that would have been great. I had a couple of conversations with people at the start of the run and they were running a little bit slower than what I wanted to set. But it would have been really, really helpful if someone was running to run around a 3:45 average kilometre pace, which I was trying to do. I was trying to do like 3:40 to 3:45. I genuinely don't think I would have been able to hold 3:40 for this run, no way. But that was what I was trying to do before the race. And maybe this was a blessing in disguise, I don't know. But again, it was really weird. And honestly, a little bit, I would say, not disappointed in myself, but it makes me think, what could I have done type thing. But again, my first Fisher Marathon, not beating myself up, getting confused at the pace around me. So that was that main reason. So after kilometre 9, I think this was when I had a little bit of a realisation where I ran a little bit quicker now. 3:44, which is kind of where I want to be. Then again, kind of spiking around this, 3:51, a little bit slower, 3:48, 3:47, 3:52. Ran a little bit quicker on the next one, 3:43, and then back up again, 3:58. It's weird, honestly. I'm so consistent with my pacing normally, so it was just purely, I know it was because I was running with all these people around me. My first marathon, my pacing was pretty consistent for the whole run. I got quicker towards the middle part of the run and a little bit slower towards the end, but typically it was actually quite consistent. And I think it was just because I was running by myself, so I could get used to the rhythm, my own rhythm, with my breath and the strides. But I was getting confused again with the rhythm of other runners for this. It's quite interesting for me to look back at this. So 3:58 on kilometre 16, and then this is when I really started to get into my flow. I got overtaken around this point, around kilometre 17, and I was sticking with this guy. He was running around 3:40 kilometres, but I could see him just in the distance. So I ran with him for about 2 kilometres, I think. So 3:41, 3:45, 3:41, 3:44, and 3:40, 3:39, 3:40, and then one spike up to 3:48. But then again, I got quicker again, where I was sticking with this guy, 3:35. These are the quickest splits of the whole run. 3:38, 3:43, and then that guy started to leave me. I saw him in the distance. It was really, really helpful having him with me, and he's wearing an orange top as well, so I could see him. It was really, really lovely. Honestly, it was helping me, an absolute treat. But then this 28k, that was where I was in the tunnel, I'm sure of it, because my watch wasn't working very well. It stopped working. And yeah, I was just trying to run my pace, and the people playing the drums in there, and like I said, I felt like the echoes, and I was running with literally my eyes closed in that tunnel. So I was running my eyes closed 5 seconds, briefly open them to make sure I'm not going into the fucking wall, and then I'd carry on. So slowed up a little bit on this point, and then this was where, honestly, I mentioned this briefly on the actual marathon video, this is where my inner bitch was so loud. The doubt in my head was starting to creep in around here now. 3:43, I kicked myself back into gear, and then 3:51, and I think this was where I kind of gotten over that bit. Maybe actually I just said that my pace got slower. Looking at this, it wasn't quite actually. Maybe that was just that 1 kilometre that seemed like an absolute age in the tunnel. I snapped out of it after the tunnel. 3:43, 3:51, 3:46, and then this is consistent from this point really. So 3:46 minus 5, 3:45 plus 1, 3 minutes 47, and then 3 minutes 50 and 3 minutes 50 again. And you see the meters and elevation, it was around 34 kilometers. That was a big hill, so it must have been actually around 35 because there's a 9 meter gain in elevation there, so it must have been around then. So for me to hold that pace is still pretty good, pretty consistent for the finish. Really happy that I managed to keep the pace when your legs are heavy, because you imagine you're running at the same pace, it feels comfortable, and the more and more you run for the race, 42 kilometers, and you're still keeping the same pace. Like 3 minutes 48 here, I believe that was my first split, 3 minutes 49, and then this last little bit at the end there, 3 minutes 26 average kilometre, I just began to absolutely sprint towards the finish line, and then people were going mad, like cheering me, and I like slightly heard my mate just go, "Go on, Jim!" But I only just about heard it. It was so subtle because it was crazy. When I was running, it's sort of pure adrenaline, and it's just like, vroom, all the noise just shut off completely, and I was just absolutely bombing it, but I did too much too soon, and before the finish line I was like walking, but I kind of knew I'd done it as well, so I was like celebrating towards the finish line. But yeah, that was that spike up in pace towards the end. And now looking up at my heart rate, if we come down here, let's take that pace off for a sec so we can just see the heart rate. So it gradually comes up and it makes sense, and I think there's a few glitches in my watch if you see around here. So it's saying that my heart rate came down to, what's that saying? That came down to 114 BPM, 95 beats per minute. My heart rate was not a 95 beats per minute. Saying here 79 BPM, 72 BPM. It's flawed, absolutely flawed. That's like some people's resting heart rates, so no. It must have been a glitch that. I think it was working well for the start of the run. I think here it was working absolutely great. So you see a gradual rise, and it actually, if I put my pace back on, it goes with my pace. So the spike's up in pace, my heart rate comes up, and it's getting tougher around the middle part of the run, but this was when my kilometre paces were quicker. You know, when if we look back up at here, where we're running these quick kilometres around the middle part of the run, these 40, 35, that's when my heart rate's at its highest, so that makes sense. So my average heart rate is 160 BPM according to this, but it must have been higher than that. And this I'm really pleased with. So it's saying 160 BPM on here, but it's also saying it came down to 77 BPM. So I know that isn't correct. I'm really pleased with it, because a lot of runners, like if you're running at your peak for a marathon, you want to be running around 80% of your max heart rate. Now, my max heart rate, who knows, maybe it's like 220 BPM. That's our heart attack's 240, right? So say my max heart rate is, say, 220 BPM. So 160 is around 80%, I believe, of 200 BPM. So if my average heart rate, say 164, for example, it takes me almost closer to that 80%. I'm really pleased at this. That was one thing that I wanted to see. I needed that heart rate to be at 160, and it was, and I had glitches in my watch, so that means I was pushing myself hard, which I was really pleased with. And if you have a look around here, it's saying that this was a harder run than my usual efforts, which obviously it's a race, it's going to be, but again, it's the hardest out of all of them, so really pleased with that. I know this has been a little bit more of a rambly video, and I said in my last video that I'd be showing my carb load, but I'm doing that in the next video. I do apologise for that. I wanted to make this video a little bit quicker, so I thought it would be better being closer to the run. Forgive me for not being quite as organised as potentially I could have been, but again, if you've enjoyed the video, I'd hugely appreciate you to drop the video a like. I'll see you next week where I'm going to be doing my carb load. Thank you very much for watching.